Ever heard someone say,
Banjo-Kazooie, nuts and bolts isn't a bad game, but it is a bad Banjo-Kazooie game?
This statement irks me. I am glad nuts and bolts gets more slack nowadays. But ever hear someone say that Super Mario Galaxy is a bad Mario Kart game? Or that Mario Party is a bad Mario Golf game? Doesn't that sound absurd to you? Why are you judging that one genre with the other? Apples and oranges, that's what that is. Do you ever get yelled at for being different? It isn't fun. And that's my point. Granted. And you may have noticed I'm leaving out context there, and wisely observed. Mario has consistent releases. Banjo-Kazooie, Nuts and Bolts was the first Banjo-Kazooie game in 8 years, for normies, and more than 8 years and counting with a Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing and a Super Smash Bros. Ultimate Pit Stop in between. But my point is that had Banjo more consistent releases like Mario, or more realistically more like Crash Bandicoot back in the day, nobody would call Banjo-Kazooie, Nuts and Bolts a bad Banjo game if the franchise had a few more games beforehand, something which wasn't likely to happen at the time because Rare was a small studio and they were tasked to make bigger games and spread themselves thin in the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 era. That's all I wanted to say initially. But while you're still here, Banjo-Kazooie, Nuts and Bolts is often just simply called a car game. Or even worse, just a racing game. Banjo-Kazooie, Nuts and Bolts is an odd game. You can't neatly fit it into one genre. It's a genre of its own. Yes, it's a vehicle-based game. But you build them like Legos or a house in Minecraft. And you build them however you want. Cars, bikes, planes, boats, eggmobiles, literally just your chair with springs attached to them, pure novelty. This game is best described as a puzzle game, I wanna say. You're given a mission, and for any mission where you can make your own vehicle, you basically have a puzzle you can solve in any way you want. As long as you ideally are still in the lenient jiggy rank for the sake of reaching Gruntilda at the end. Do you meticulously make the perfect boat for the situation? The ideal weight and speed so you don't go out of control? Do you use a pre-built vehicle and maybe adjust it a tiny bit, adding more fuel, or weapons? Do you make an armored tank with an empty bottom with springs underneath so you can jump over the thing and cover it from incoming harm? In a vehicle duel, do you make a cage to trap your enemy in and unload hell into them with your weaponry? Do you make an all-purpose vehicle that isn't shapely, but is a jack of all trades? Or do you just make your car a rocket-powered shoe with a self-destruct feature that you somehow made crucial to your success in a few missions? I am not making jokes. These are all valid solutions. If you like the sound of that based on my description and have an Xbox 360, Xbox One, or Xbox Series X, and are a creative type person, Banjo-Kazooie, Nuts and Bolts may be the game for you. If you like platforming in colorful worlds, collecting stuff for the sake of it, with bopping music, you can draw your own conclusions there. I feel like the understandable hate and dismissal Banjo-Kazooie, Nuts and Bolts gets is a bit unfortunate. Not sure if the game would have sold well if it wasn't the only big boy Banjo-Kazooie game in 8 years. But I'd like to imagine that it somehow spawned a few imitators. And this new genre blossomed and evolved into something great. Picture this, you are an errand boy in a big world. Like Breath of the Wild big. And you start on a bike, delivering errands. You got some overarching goal that gets made easier the more car parts you get doing favors or finding them in an overworld. You earn parts in a drip feed and you also need to manage your resources by keeping your things fueled. You work up to earning your plane. And you worked for that plane. Or whatever vehicle you like. But if you're crazy, you can just beat the game with your Inky Dink delivery bike. That's a game I'd love to see happen. But it won't, because Banjo-Kazooie, Nuts and Bolts is a dirty word. You think Banjo-Kazooie, Nuts and Bolts and one of the first things that come to mind is,
oh, that's the one nobody likes.
In summation, it's valid to not like Banjo-Kazooie, Nuts and Bolts for being different from Banjo-Kazooie, and Banjo-Tooie. But nobody would call Banjo-Kazooie, Nuts and Bolts a bad Banjo-Kazooie game. Had we've had more Banjo-Kazooie games leading up to it. I also think its hate and dismissal due to its circumstances is unfortunate because I think it could have been the beginning of a new genre but was just kneecapped right out of the gate. But we'll never know.